As director of the Institute for Athletic Coach Education in the School of Education at Boston University, I want to welcome all the participants in this day. I want to acknowledge Chris Lynch from the Boston Youth Sports Initiative and Megan Bartlett from Up to Us for the great work that they did in putting this day together. It's been an enjoyable collaboration for all of us. And I would also like to thank Lou Bergholz for agreeing to be our facilitator today. And I'd like to thank our event coordinator, Dawn Quinlan, for helping us get everything together. I'm so pleased that all of you could make it today, especially since we didn't have a lot of lead time in getting you here. And it really demonstrates your passion for how sport is impacting young people and understanding of the role and responsibility, the important role and responsibility of the coach in making that an important experience for kids. This event is really part of a bigger vision for the Institute for Athletic Coach Education that we started about 6 years ago. And this is the type of event we want to be associated with because it's convening some important thought leaders, some people who are delivering programs, some academics, other people who are involved with youth sport and that we think can really help help realize the potential of sport in our society. So there's a few things that we need to do today. The goal of the day is to come away with a white paper. So oftentimes we have discussions like this and they don't necessarily go anywhere. But we have some great minds in the room and some great folks that are here to consider what could we do differently. So our job will be to come away at the end of the day with a written product. Now it's not going to be polished at the end of the day, but Up to Us and Boston University are going to collaborate on what we come away with the day from. And I think that'll be an exciting product for us to look at, for everyone, and to share with a wider audience. And then finally, if you're like me, somewhere in the mid-morning, you'll start thinking about when your next meal is coming. So we're going to be meeting down at Qdoba, which is right down the end of the block here. And everyone's welcome to come for as long as they can come. And that should be a continuation of our day. But for now, I'd like to pass the baton here to Chris Lynch to talk to you about our next phase. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Chris Lynch with the Boston Youth Sports Initiative, which is a strategic arm of Boston After School and Beyond. The goals of the Boston Youth Sports Initiative are to increase the scale, quality, and sustainability of sports-based youth development programming in the city of Boston. Obviously, it ties to other aspects of the country, and that's why we're having this discussion today. When we think about quality of sports-based youth development programs here in Boston, a lot of the work that we have done has been around coach development, coaches training, and I just wanted to, without getting too deep into the work that we do, acknowledge that one of the things we're very excited about in Boston is the number of organizations that are really taking the lead in coach development here in the city that are also sort of spreading nationally. And as one of the things that we've done, again, focusing on coach development, has to bring together 6 organizations based in Boston to try and think through how they can work together to what we call increase both the supply and the demand for quality coach training and coach development. This group sort of somewhat hilariously called the Guild, because they sort of work together, include BU, Northeastern Center for the Study of Sport and Society, Wheelock College, the Positive Coaching Alliance, Metro Boston Coaches Academy, and the Women's Sports Foundation. We've spent a lot of time with these groups working to plug them into to different programs, and we've been thrilled at the work that they've done, and are very happy that that BU is taking the advantage of bringing everybody together today. Some of what Boston Youth Sports Initiative does, in addition to connecting resources, is try to bring some of the on-the-ground knowledge together to the groups. And one of the things, as we set, my job here is to set a little bit of context for the day, is that at most conferences like this that I've been to, the discussion evolves around different sport delivery types. So that represented here, we have a range of them, and in working with Up to Us and the work here, we really are looking at sports-based youth development programs in 4 buckets. And we believe that this is, for the most part, national, as all of this starts to test out with the Up to Us members. So basically the 4 buckets, and again, trying to set the context for the different coach development that we'll talk about today. Recreation programs are a big part of this. These are the generally all volunteer-led programs that run Pop Warner, youth soccer, youth lacrosse, all across the country. We'll be able to get people this slide so that you can see what we're looking at. The other part of this are center-based programs, whether those are at Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, community centers. Oftentimes the goals there are to get the kids into the centers, to plug them into other things in addition to the sports. The Sports Plus programs are sort of an emerging group. We're very fortunate to have a number of these in Boston, where it is very intentionally sports-based youth development programs, so that it is the sport along with either academic support, community service, mentoring, character development. And then finally, the school-based programs, which are the high school teams, the middle school teams, all across the country. So as we think about the conversation today, I think it's helpful to think that kids are involved in sports in different ways, and there are different goals of those. So one last bit of context that I'll set before I will hand it over to Lou for the panel is that we wanted to, rather than spend a lot of time in this conference talking about what the barriers are to quality coach development, we wanted to do a survey of everyone and say, what are they, so that we can recognize them and then start talking today about what can be done, because that's really the goal. And as we did a survey of everyone here, who I think are a very educated group of people around sports and youth sport coaching, these are the barriers that came up. Time is one. It's very difficult, we heard, to get coaches to participate in this, for the administrators to set it up, all of it. It takes time, and that's a barrier. The second point that people brought up were the costs, that trying to set these things up and set up systems cost money that a lot of times the programs don't have, and trying to get the coaches to these things, again, is another cost issue. The third piece that we heard from people was youth development, and what I think this meant, as we saw the surveys, was to say that sports isn't just about winning and losing. A lot of times at the end of a season, if you ask a coach how the season went and they said we were 4-5, that's not much of a great answer for the development of the kids, and that sort of matching up of youth development goals and their work is also a barrier or a challenge. The fourth was cultural competency, making sure that the coaches are able to work effectively with kids depending on their settings, and that can be challenging in a lot of different ways. And the final one was retention. How do we keep good coaches? Where do they go over time? So again, I'm really excited about today. We thank John for setting this up, and Megan, and Up to Us, and Caitlin for doing all the work that they've done. We're looking forward to a really good discussion with some unbelievable panelists. So thank you for coming. Hopefully this has set a little bit of context. So Lou, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. So good morning, everybody. What I want to do drop my paper before I start, is set a little bit of tone for our panel, frame sort of the morning so we can get in the right mindset, and then just jump in, because we have limited time, and as Chris mentioned, a pretty remarkable set of panelists and a remarkable audience. And I think that's where I wanted to start, is that we've got a cross-section of people up here that represent a real sort of national slice of really leading thinkers and practitioners in terms of youth coach development. But also, that's all of you in the room as well. And so you can look here and look at the panelists and think, okay, I could probably be number 9 up here, and you're right. And I want to sort of frame that, because we're seeing this as a panel of peers. When our panel piece is done, we're going to head into a number of breakout groups, and all the panelists are going to go to the tables. This is not, ooh, I get to sit with Don or Jim or Judy and let's pick their brain. This is another peer joining you as a group to start to collaborate and bring all of the great minds together to sort of do some real work. So we've set this group up here to sort of frame the morning, to give us some really remarkable and hopefully sort of diverse and differing perspectives on youth coach development moving forward, and then to get to work. And that's the next piece I wanted to say to frame the morning, is that we're heading towards, by lunch, really doing some real work around this white paper. So we've got 2 audiences today. One is all of us, and so today is a great learning opportunity, first and foremost. Second of all, it's an amazing opportunity to really think about this community and sort of network, build the community of practice that we're going to talk about more formally this morning. But then third, we have this other audience, which is this white paper audience, and this is sort of the policy, the practice, the research side, and that is our intended audience, is to sort of take this group and hopefully let this group not just be sort of a one-off meeting, but to figure out a way to have this collection of individuals start to inform sort of a much more bigger movement, a much more bigger process of taking youth coach development and figuring out sort of what's next on the national level. Where do we go in the United States to take it to that place where we start to have sort of the national sense of what it means to develop coaches, not just who do great work on the sports skill, right, but also do the work on youth development as well. And that's that intersection that my understanding, and I believe all of us are here because we are in the middle. We're sort of looking at both the sports skill side, but also the youth development side. And that's the opportunity we have together. And that's where we're heading by lunch, is to keep that sort of target audience in mind. Today is obviously about you, but it's also about sort of getting information out, sharing ideas, being able to collectively put together our brains and our experience and get as much on paper as we can that will help to inform this white paper. So that's the plan. We're going to take it in 3 parts. Part 1 will be our panel, and I'll frame the panel question in a minute. Part 2 is going to be this series of 2 breakout sessions, and we've created some sort of maximum mixed groups based on a couple of different criteria, and we'll have 2 different questions that really get at sort of the nuts and bolts of what we can hear from the panelists that we can use to really create that information for the panel, for the white paper. And then third will be, hopefully you can stick around and stay for lunch, and that's where, if you didn't get the time to connect with the people you want to, you have the chance to do that at lunch as well. So that's the plan. Without further ado, here's what we're going to do with the panelists. We're thinking about, let me back up, thinking about a really visionary kind of question, and all of us should ponder this. Because your vision is as vital as what the folks up here have to say. We're going to give them the floor to give some perspective, and as they're sharing, take it in and think about it and sort of reference it to how you see the future and current state of youth coach development in the United States. But the question really is around, if we think out 5 years, 2016, and we want to end up at a place or have a reality that is current in 2016 where youth sport coach development is happening at a national level, where there's a system in place, where youth sport coaches are learning how to develop sports skills and youth development, and it's happening in this really sort of beautiful national way. What does that look like? 5 years out, 2016, what is the vision for that? And what's it going to take to get there? We're going to hopefully have time to follow up with what could be some barriers, what could be some first steps. But that is the question that we want to all try to ponder for the next 40 minutes. And we're going to allow each of our panelists just a couple of minutes to sort of give their sort of high-level vision and offer you all the chance to sort of take that in. I encourage you to make some notes, think about how this resonates or doesn't for your vision, because when we get into the breakout groups, we're going to take sort of a deeper look at some of the pieces that go into making that happen. Whatever the vision ends up being, what it's going to take to get there. We, as you can imagine, getting together a collection of really high-powered folks who work in youth sport development. We had to go back in the corner and have a game to figure out who went first. Okay, we didn't do that. We just selected at random, but Dave actually volunteered to go first. So we're going to start with Dave from the United States Olympic Committee. I'm going to introduce each person. I'm not going to do the bios. You have the bios in your folder, so if you don't know everybody up here, here's your chance to get a sneak peek. In your folder are all the bios. You can take a chance to read that while each person's speaking. But otherwise, I want to sort of make the most of the time. So we're going to sort of bounce around from side to side here. Each speaker is going to have about 4 minutes to share, and then we'll just sort of keep going. We're not going to do a Q&A. So just keep that in mind. This is really taking the time that we have to get some vision out there, a little bit of perspective, and we'd rather save that time for you to have all of our panelists join the tables and get into your opportunity to contribute as well. So I'd like to start with Dave McCann from the United States Olympic Committee.
Thank you, Lou. Is this on? In 1978, the Congress of the United States created the USOC, the modern USOC, with the Amateur Sports Act. And about 4 or 5 of the purposes that are listed in the Amateur Sports Act pertain to providing information to coaches, athletes, the general public on physical education, activity, recreation, and sports and coaching. Since 1978, the USOC has been involved in a number of projects, mostly putting on conferences, disseminating information from sports scientists that we have on staff at the USOC, recognizing coaches and Coach of the Year programs, and supporting our national governing bodies in their coaching programs. I've been involved with coaching education for about 16 years now, from the youth level, high schools, with the US ski team, and now with the USOC. And one thing I've noticed in recent years is that there's a lot of great things going on out there. There's a lot of good people, there's a lot of great programs going on all over the country. But there seems to be something kind of missing. There seems to be, we're leaving money on the table. There's an untapped potential out there. And I don't think I'm the only one who feels it. We met with our national governing bodies a couple of weeks ago, and there was a general, we're doing a good job, but it's not all there yet. And when, Lou provided us with the question, what's the vision? And I can, in talking with folks, the vision is a national system. We're pretty much one of the only countries out there that does not have a national coaching education system. You look in Australia, Canada, Britain, Ireland, South Africa, they've all got national programs now. And so I think that's where we really need to go. We need to somehow bring together all the good work in some unified program. And I'm going to steal a sentence from a friend of mine up in Canada, Istvan Bali. System alignment and integration. Basically design a system where everybody is going in the same direction. We know what we want to do. We want to have great athletes, but we want to have good people out there too. And I personally believe good people make great athletes. And so what we need to do is be in the same direction, be coordinated so that we're not stepping on each other's toes, we're not reinventing the wheel over and over again. I mean, nothing drives me crazier than to see, every NGB doing the same thing over and over again. We have limited money. In this country, we have, probably 1/10 of what the Aussies are putting into it, the Canadians, the Brits now. We don't have exorbitant amounts of cash to fund all our programs. So we have to do things better and smarter. So there's 3 areas that I think we really need to address. One is leadership, and you're seeing leadership starting to rise to the top. The second is structure, based on, I'm a big proponent of long-term athlete development. And the final thing is buy-in, and that's getting everybody to commit to work together on the same system. So, just to wrap it up, and this came from our national governing bodies, they want to collaborate, and not just with each other, but with universities, youth sports, because if we don't all do this together, the whole system falls apart. That's pretty much where I'm coming from. How'd I do?
3.5. You were great. 30 seconds to spare.
30 seconds? So I think the areas we really need to focus on are research, collaboration, information sharing, and promotion. And get the word out there why coaching education is important and what the benefits are. More, better coaches have provide athletes with a better experience so we have less attrition, we have more kids active, a healthier lifestyle, healthier population, and that sort of all relates to a better society.
Great. Dave, thank you very much. Can we give him a round of applause? So I want to really encourage everyone, please, as we're going through all of the panelists, take a peek at the bios, because it's going to give you some incredible context for not just what they're saying, but where they might be coming from, because the perspectives are so different in terms of their background. It's really valuable to sort of put that in a little bit of context for their story as well. We're going to continue on, and our next speaker is going to be Don Siegel from Springfield College.
Actually, it's Smith College.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
You're right, Al from Springfield College. There we go.
Okay, but I'm here, and I'll get started. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. I think this is a great event to bring together great thinkers and people who are out there.
Can you speak more into the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm getting all.
Okay. As I was saying, I think it's a great event here to bring together such a powerful group of people who are not only talking the talk but also doing the walk. But in any event, I think I'd like to continue where Dave left off, and I think that one of the things that I think is very clear to most people, and I know in preparing for this presentation, when I started looking to see what is out there, it's very, very variable, and to try to aggregate it in a way that makes sense is very, very difficult. So I think that one of the things I'd like to see in 5 years is to have some organization, maybe up to us as the organization, to put together a database of programs that actually exist. So instead of having to spend hours and hours looking around to discern what people are doing, that would be easily available. I think a second thing is that I think that we need to work together, because there are lots of good programs that already exist, and there are national standards that a lot of people don't know about. AFER, NCASey, which Chris Hickey's here today, he's the executive director, that they've been working for almost 20 years with lots and lots of people to create national standards, and they exist so that there are criteria against which all these different programs can be assessed and put into a database, and the database could have some kind of assessment of to what degree these programs are meeting those standards. So I think that that's a second thing that I'd like to see. I think that it's probably, although it would be a great thing to have a national program, I don't think the United States probably is ready for that. I think we thrive on variability and people doing their own thing. So I think that having the database, and for different organizations being able to pick and choose what's appropriate for their organization, to me, is probably more likely to happen. I think a third thing that I think is very important is that although we're all in this room, and it's kind of like preaching to the choir, that we all agree that coaching education is tremendously important, and the coach is at the hub of what goes on. And I think that that's something that we all agree to. I don't think that we've done a very good job in selling this to the public in general, that what is the value added for what we're doing, that we know it, but I think that we need to be better advocates. I know that Up to Us has made some initiatives with legislators in different states and also in Congress. And I think we have to also do that with the public, looking at some of the advertising, for instance, that Nike does, and Just Do It. I don't think that we are probably getting our message out there to the extent that we probably could, because people ultimately, as we saw on the slide, have to devote their time and also their money to buying into this, and unless the value is obvious, they're probably not going to do that. Last thing I would say is I think that the funding streams for supporting different youth sport programs, probably funders could be more proactive in either allocating more money towards coaching education or making coaching education contingent on getting grants, so that funders would not be funding organizations unless they met some minimal standards, and also that a significant part of what they did was to educate their coaches, because ultimately we know no matter how good curriculums are or how well organized programs are, if we don't have people who are trained working with the kids, that probably not a whole lot of good is going to happen. So I think that for me, those are the things that I'd like to see.
Don, thank you very much. We're going to bounce back to this side of the room. This is next up is going to be Judy Young from NASPE. And again, we're thinking about this 2016, where do we want to go? What's going to take to get there?
Good morning, and I'm glad I came after Dawn to follow up on the activities of NASB and NHWS at AFERD in developing, as he said a long time ago, the standards, and that was a consensus document, and nobody has ever really said that there are things in there that coaches don't need to know and be able to do. However, it's a lot of stuff, and so most programs pick and choose, which in our system is the way it goes, and emphasize one piece or part or the other of these standards. But you have one on your table if you want to see the overview and are not familiar with the standards of what is included in the standards. And I think that is some kind of standards is the base, but we said that today we're going to think about how we can develop a coaching development or coaching education system. And I think I agree definitely with a couple of the points that have already been made. We need a national policy and a state policy and a local policy that supports qualified coaches at all levels and in all the purposes of coaches, whether it's high performance kind of goal or whether it's a recreational goal or whether it's a health and activity goal. All of our coaches need to be well qualified, and we are the only country, I think, in the world that doesn't have some kind of policy in place that says coaches are professionals. We need to establish a profession of coaching and not assume that it can be an amateur enterprise. And that doesn't mean that we won't be using volunteers in various ways, but they would be under the supervision of qualified coach experts. The funding issue, I think, is a major one, because one of the things that it takes, as was already mentioned also, is training programs that are continuing ed, and we need to have undergraduate and graduate level preparation the same way we would for a teacher or a nurse or any other professional. And then we need to keep them up to date and keep them current with continuing education and staff development. So I think that the purposes that we have, the policies would support the purposes, and they need to be a lot more specific than the Amateur Sport Act is, which we've been reauthorizing periodically over time, but it's very general, especially as it relates to coach education and coach development. So I think if we could have policy, we could look at coaching as a profession and do the support things that we do in other professions to develop that profession, provide significant funding that would support the policies that we make, and work together, collaborate, and coalesce the many efforts that are out there now. We would be making progress toward 2016. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Judy. We're going to come back over this way to Al Pettipas from Springfield College.
Well, I think I like to dream big, so my dream is that instead of sport coaches, we have youth development coaches. And I've seen several organizations now that have redefined their mission from a sports-specific area to a youth development area. And the sport serves the purpose of positioning people where they have chances to learn the skills that are being taught, both physical, psychological, emotional, through the sport, and then have opportunities to transfer those skills into other domains of their life. Because I think the notion of sport is wonderful. However, I don't think that anything in sport transfers automatically outside of sport. And unless people are trained to facilitate that transfer, I'm not sure that sport is really positioning itself to serve as many young people in positive ways as it might. I think that coach education is a process that takes a number of years, but I think if the organization commits to youth development and they're willing to put in the the clout to demand that their coaches participate in programs that will help them learn not only some sports skills, but also how to develop youth, how to build relationships, then I think in general they become more effective.
Great. Al, thank you very much. Jim Thompson, Positive Coaching Alliance, the floor is yours.
Thank you. When Chris called me and said, would you like to come out to this? I like to think I have a teachable spirit. I said, who else is going to be there? He said, Don Hellison. I said, I'm going to be there. Then he told me who else is going to be there, so it's like, wow, this is fantastic. I want to focus a little differently and say, what's the goal of what we're talking about here? And I think the goal is behavior change. I would ask how wonderful is it working the national systems in other countries? If the goal is to get Olympic athletes, it's working better or less. But the issue is, how do we get coaches to change their behavior? I'm going to cover 4 different items. First is mental models and culture. Everybody has a mental model. If you're a professional, you have a mental model that drives your behavior, whether you know it or not. If you're a police officer, a teacher, an attorney, a coach, the prevalent model for coaches is win at all costs, and that's what drives people's behavior. So just going through training doesn't necessarily change that. This requires a cultural response. Culture is the way we do things here, and the way youth sports is done mimics professional sports. Again, just giving people some training doesn't necessarily change that. I think this effort is more like the anti-smoking crusade than it is like driver's ed. It's not a question of just transmitting information. It's about changing people's mindset. We have a model to replace the win-at-all-costs coach model with the double goal coach. First goal is winning. Competitive world, kids need to learn to compete in the right way. Second, more important goal, using sports to teach life lessons. Mental models and culture, that's number 1. Number 2 is motivation and identity. I think virtually every coach, certainly every high school coach I've ever met, but most coaches want to see themselves as builders of men and women. They want to see themselves that way. They also want to be validated as coaches. Coaching is a very public thing. It's not like teaching where you're in your classroom and people don't see you. You're on display. So they want to be validated as coaches, and the clearest path to validation is what? A winning record. So obviously winning is a big deal. But they do want to validate themselves as character educators. Now, there's 2 ways you can get people to do what you want them to do. Carrots and sticks. You do what I tell you to do and I'll reward you. Don't do it and I'll punish you. That's one way. The other way, which I think is much more powerful, is to get people to adopt an identity. So people would say, I'm a double goal coach. I'm faced with this situation. What would a double goal coach do in this situation? Oh, that's what I'm going to do. So if we can get people to adopt the identity of a double goal coach, a character educating coach, then they are going to try to live up to that without a lot of sanctions. Culture is important for reinforcing that. Again, coaches want to be validated, and you get validated by a winning record. John Madden once said, winning is the best deodorant. You can get away with a lot of stuff if you win. Bobby Knight stops winning so much, and pretty soon he's out of a job. Mental models and culture, motivation, identity. Third one is coherence versus completeness. Completeness is a killer of interest. I used to work with faculty at the Stanford Business School, and to try to get them, I use the analogy of you, the professor, are the wind and the students are the sailboat. If the students don't put their sails up, you can blow all you want, they're not going to go anywhere. And the professors are like, oh, but I've got all this stuff I got to cover. Completeness is a killer of motivation. Coherence is what we want. Get people to adopt that identity, then they begin teachable spirit. They begin to look for ways to become a better double goal coach. Fourth one is mandates and value added. Positive Coaching Alliance, been in this business about 11 and a half years now. The only way you get large numbers of coaches to go through training is by mandating it. It's the only way. We just signed a deal with the Texas UIL, the governing body for public school sports in Texas. 40,000 coaches going through our online training. Some of them probably don't like it, but they have to do it. Signed another deal with AAU. 50,000 AAU coaches are going to be going through our training. Some of them aren't going to like it, although I have to tell you, and Bob Bigelow gave me a hard time this morning, oh, why'd you guys get associated with AAU? AAU is embracing positive coaching, and I think you're going to see some changes. And if you don't, in 2 or 3 years, then come back and tell me, guys, you guys failed. It's mandated, and we're getting a great response from both the leadership of AAU and from the coaches that go through our online training. You got to require it, and then when you require it, you got to deliver. It's got to add value to the coaches. You can make them go through something once, and if it's not good, if they don't see it adding value, on 2 levels, I get validated because it's going to help me be a better winning coach, and it's going to help me build great men and women.
All right, there we go. Thanks, Jim. We're going to stay on this side of the room and move to Dean Conway from JP Youth Soccer.
Good morning. I'm a soccer coach principally, although I love a lot of sports, other sports, and what strikes me is that coaching one sport to coaching another sport is largely transferable. I think it means to me over time that things like organization and patience and enthusiasm and connection with the kids are much more important in the long run than necessarily technical skill at a particular sport. But over all these years that I've been involved with principally soccer and being an English teacher, a conjunction that struck me time and again is the fact that if we can't agree on certain meanings, if we can't agree on certain terms that we use and words that we use, which words being flexible, then we run into trouble. So I think if we're thinking about the future, if we're thinking about a coherent way to put together a national, regional system of sport, we've got to agree somehow, or at least agree to disagree, about the meanings of several words. And one of them is organization, because sport is as filled with irony and contradiction as anything else in life. And sometimes it strikes me that sports are completely disorganized, and once the game starts, soccer being a perfect example, it's totally unpredictable. It's not chaotic, as a lot of people think, but the fact is that anything can happen, and we have to have tolerance for that. On the other hand, when we go to practice, it's a good thing to be organized. So one of the ways to get better at all this, I think, is to convince people that organization has its place. When you go for your 90-minute session on Tuesday night with your team, it's best to be organized, to know essentially how you're going to monitor time and space. But as for the play itself, easy, because you don't necessarily have control of that. And if you're going to be an effective coach, you have to accept that reality, I think. The other word that I think we have to talk about and agree on, it's incredibly subtle and can be incredibly ironic, is competition. Because if you go into a schoolyard at recess time and you put a ball down, then the kids start to compete really intently. And you don't need to convince kids to compete. They love to compete. It's intrinsic in what we do. But it can really get in the way of development. And if coaches reduce their season to, well, you know, we were 8-2, that's good. Last season we were 2-7 or 2-8, that's bad. All I can say is, to be brief, is not necessarily. I wouldn't draw any particular conclusions from somebody telling me the record of their team. But I think we're a relatively obsessive culture when it comes to competing and winning. Somehow we have to get through that if we want to do justice to the kids that we're serving. The other 2 words are, and I'll then, it will probably take us years to straighten both these out, are, one of them is fresh. The more I see, the more I realize that probably less is more. If somebody said, you want more training time, I'd say, not necessarily. If I've only got 3 hours a week with my kids, maybe I'd like a little more, but then it's a question of, you know, what am I going to do with it? And then the last notion is just that the world of childhood, and trying to always come at what we do from a perspective of a child. If we coach 6-year-olds in soccer, any sport, if we're coaching 14-year-old tennis players, then we have to empathize. We have to get inside their brain, inside their emotional state, inside their cognitive way. Otherwise, I don't think we do justice to them either.
Thank you, Dean. We're going to go to Don Hellison, University of Illinois, Chicago.
Thank you. Well, I hate to add a really bad note today because everybody's very upbeat, but Al stole what I wanted to say. So I have to say that. I've spent my whole career in urban settings, low-income kids, all of that. So I come with a particular perspective. But I say that so you know that I'm shaped to a large extent by my experiences. And where I start with all of this is I like the kids to be decent human beings. That would be most important. And you don't hear anything about sport in there. Where sport comes in, physical activity, I would say, because there's lots of things that aren't competitive sport that would be really good for kids, is I found that a great medium for working with kids, to help kids become decent human beings. At the same time, we can be all very positive, but there are some, I think, issues that we need to recognize and address and try to find some ways of handling these things. I'll just give you a couple. One that everybody knows, I think, is the professionalization of sport in youth sport. And when you see a kid that's 4 years old and he wins the state wrestling championship at the 45-pound category or whatever it is, we're probably, going a little bit over what we need to be doing for kids. A different example, and this is one I've really dealt with a lot. John Thompson, who was the coach at Georgetown, very well known. What he used to tell his players is, or ask his players, is what are you going to do when the air goes out of the ball? And he had a deflated basketball in his office. Well, the kids I work with, that's a really big issue. Whether they ever make a team, when they get into high school, a lot of them think they're going to be in the NBA. A few of them in the NFL, but mainly the NBA. It's the culture, it's the nature of the culture. And what do? Do you destroy their dreams? How do you address that in a positive way and help the kids move on? I don't have an answer to that, but the thing that I've fooled around with for a long time is to have them have a backup plan. And I don't know if I've been very successful, but I'm successful enough to have them tell each other about backup plans. That's about all I could tell. I could hear them talk to each other about that stuff. And I suggest a good backup plan would be to get an education, learn to read and write and think, so that they can get a job and be productive human beings. I guess the other thing I would say is that I really believe in diversity, and I believe that we need as many different kinds of ideas out on the table, people doing different things, different options for kids. So that if we need to have a traveling team and all of that, fine, but we need to have some other options as well, and that's already come up a number of times. And I think on one of the overheads, about having recreation and then having other options. So I just want to say that I agree with that.
Thank you, Don. And last but not least, Eli Wolf from Brown University.
Hi, good morning, everybody. As I was getting ready to thinking about and hearing the panelists, I sort of had these flashbacks to my youth. And so I thought I would just share a couple quick stories about why I got into human rights work. And mostly it was because of experiences with coaches. So I remember that when I was younger, I was on like a youth soccer team, and we were in the gym, and one of the coaches, he was having us all do pull-ups, and for me, I just couldn't, I couldn't do the pull-up because of my disability, and I was asking if there might be a way to like adapt it or do something other creative solution, and I remember the coach being really stern and strict about my, having to do it that way. And I remember getting really pissed off and telling him to go screw himself. And the next thing I knew, I was in the principal. And the next thing I knew, I was advocating for my rights to have an adapted environment. And the next thing I knew, that the coach was in the principal's office. And we kind of figured it out that maybe it's okay to adapt and things like that. The second quick story is on the soccer playing field, another youth soccer team. I remember just some of the students and some of the kids I was playing with, we were doing penalty kicks, and I remember some of the kids like teasing me and sort of saying, oh, this kid with disability, how can he play or how can he score on a penalty kick? And I remember we were just all practicing, and I just remember thinking, like, where's the coach? Is there anyone around to maybe kind of help me on this one? And I just remember that the way I had to kind of show myself in that situation was to score a goal in the upper 90. So, and then that way kind of broke the ice. But at the same time, both of those situations were both sort of, I guess, sort of powerful for me to think that like maybe things could have been different. At the same time, I guess it might have been good because it made me who I am in terms of being an advocate for human rights. So I guess I wanted to share those two stories. And then on another front, I wanted to sort of switch gears for a moment to think a little bit about how sport is really understood and how it's perceived in sort of a greater sense. In some ways, being at Brown University and other institutions within college settings, and even just through the media and so forth, sport, there's sort of one way we often see sport, from the entertainment or the escape, or kind of not necessarily the educational value of sport. And even with some of my conversations with coaches at Brown, the coaches don't even always see themselves as educators. They see themselves as separate from the institution itself, which is sort of ironic because, being in an educational environment, when these student athletes or young people go across the street, like at different campuses, oftentimes athletics is placed separately. And so to what extent are we really understanding and embracing and putting on a different pair of glasses when we see the role of coaches or sport from an educational perspective? And so I think, for me, that's sort of the key to all of this, is how do we really change the lens on how we take sport seriously, and how we really are recognizing that coaches do have an important educational role, and how do we kind of, blow up the institutions and redefine sport as more integral to that. I think that would really be a powerful vision. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank and honor all of the panelists on several fronts. First and foremost, in a small way, but for being timely. We have our 1-minute timekeeper in the back, and everybody was stuck to the time, which allowed everyone to have the chance to share. But more importantly, for giving such incredible perspective. And I think also for modeling what it means to be a bit of a community of practice and learners. I don't know if you noticed, but even to the last panelist, as Eli was speaking, there's still some of the other panelists taking notes. I'm assuming that's on things that they were learning or things that were intriguing they want to make note of.